Welcome to the Word of the Day. It's about that time. Thank you for joining me, and please consider subscribing to my channel. Today we continue our journey of Israel, the life of Jacob and Joseph. This is part 2. The Word of the Day's passion is to have a progressive relationship with the King, always growing and moving forward. The scriptures say, "So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God." This is Romans 10:17. In order to have an intimate relationship with the King, we must understand who He is, how He operates, and why He came. For the Lord Jesus said that I come in the volume of the book, it is written of me. This is Hebrews 10:7. So let's delve into who He is. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. When we last spoke, Jacob and his older brother Esau reconciled their relationship after decades of being estranged from each other. Even though they mended their relationship, they could not remain in the same land. Their substance was so vast and great, it was impossible for them to remain together. So Esau left and dwelt in the land of Mount Seir. Then Rachel, Jacob's wife, died, giving birth to Jacob's 12th son, Benjamin, as they were traveling toward Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Now Joseph is Jacob's 11th son, whom Rachel, his beloved wife, gave birth to, and the most favored by his father Jacob, for he is the son of Jacob's old age. Joseph attended to his father as he started to get older. He would give a report to his father about what was going on with the family and the land. Now when Joseph was 17, while he was out with his brothers feeding the flocks, Joseph told his father about the bad deeds of his brothers, that they weren't doing what they were supposed to. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his other children because Joseph attended to him. So Israel chose to make Joseph a coat of many colors. When his brothers saw that their father loved and favored Joseph more, they all hated and were jealous of Joseph and couldn't speak well about him. Now Joseph dreamed a dream one day, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more for it. He said, "Let me tell you about my dream that I had. We were binding bundles of grain in the field, and suddenly my bundle of grain stood upright, and behold, your bundles of grain stood around mine, and all your bundles of grain bowed down to mine." The brother said, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us, so that we have to bow down to you?" They hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Joseph's brothers acted like he had some kind of control over his dreams, but we must understand that our dreams are a message or revelation that God is trying to bring to us. But his brothers were so jealous of him that they didn't even take into account the revelation that God was trying to give. He dreamed again and told it to his brothers. If I had been Joseph, I would have stopped telling them about my dreams. But I'm sure Joseph didn't realize how much his brothers truly hated him. Jealousy is a very wicked spirit, for it can push people to do horrific acts. So Joseph said, "I dreamed, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars," 11 meaning his brother, "paid honor to me." And he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamt?" Jacob said, "Shall I and your mothers and your brothers indeed come bow down ourselves to you?" His brothers envied him, but his father paid attention to his words. If we notice, Joseph did not start dreaming prophetic dreams until after his father gave him the coat of many colors. For his dreams are a glimpse into his destiny. For God speaks to us through dreams and visions of the night, and the many colors reveal the different giftings of God on Joseph's life. His brother went to feed their flocks in Shechem one day. Israel said to Joseph, "Didn't your brothers go to feed the flocks in Shechem? Go to your brothers and see that everything is okay with them. Then come back and tell me what's happening with them." This is why it is said that Joseph was the son of his old age. So Joseph was the one that attended to Jacob and would go out to see what the brothers were doing to make sure they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. So he went to Shechem. A certain man noticed him, for he was wandering in the field trying to find his brothers. And the man, or should I say angel, asked him, saying, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "I'm looking for my brothers. Do you know where they're feeding their flocks?" The man said, "They left before. I heard them say they were going to Dothan." So Joseph went to Dothan after his brothers and found them there. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. Jealousy is the same as murder because it pushes you to murder. This is why we must pay attention to the conditions of our heart, the animosity, the hatred, the jealousy, the bitterness, because it produces all manner of wickedness. This is why the Lord is always wanting us to be forgiving of each other, because we don't want to get to the point where we hate and want to do evil against those that we're supposed to love. So Joseph's brothers said to one another, "Look, the dreamer is coming. Come now, let us kill him and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we will see what comes of his dreams." But Reuben, Joseph's oldest brother, heard it, and he saved him from being killed. Reuben said, "We cannot kill our own brother. Shed no blood, we can just throw him into a pit in the wilderness." Because Reuben intended to save Joseph from the pit and take him back to his father, he knew better than to shed innocent blood. And it came to pass, they took the coat of many colors off of Joseph, and they took him and cast him into a pit. Thank goodness the pit was empty. There wasn't any water or anything in it. So they sat down to eat bread. So now they're sitting down to eat after they've just thrown their little brother into a pit. Again, Reuben left the rest of them. The remaining brothers lifted up their eyes and looked and saw a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, and going toward Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal our brother's blood? So let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not kill him, for he is our flesh and blood." And they agreed. Then there passed the Midianite traders, the Ishmaelites. So they lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph into Egypt. Reuben came back later and looked in the pit for his little brother, and he was going to take Joseph back to his father. But he saw Joseph wasn't in the pit, and he tore his clothes, I'm sure regretting that he had ever left him there. And he turned to his brothers and said, "Where is the boy?" They told Reuben what they did. So they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in blood. And they brought the coat of many colors to their father and said, "We found this, my father. Is this Joseph's coat?" Israel knew immediately that it was his son's coat. "An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt torn into pieces." And Israel tore his clothes and cried and threw dirt upon himself and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, "For I will die mourning my son." So his father wept for him, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's guards. This is Genesis 37. Then around that time Judah went down from his brothers and saw his friend Hira the Adullamite. Judah saw there where he was at a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he wed her and went in unto her, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Er. And she conceived again and bare another son, and she called his name Onan. And then she conceived one more time, and they called his name Selah. Then Judah took a wife for Er his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Er, Judah's firstborn, was a wicked man in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to his middle son Onan, "Go and sleep with your brother's wife, and marry her and raise up seed in your brother's name, for that was the custom to do that at that time. But Onan did not want to produce seed in his brother's name. So when it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, Tamar, that he spilled his seed on the ground, so that he would not give seed in his brother's name. That thing displeased the Lord, so God killed him as well. Then Judah said to Tamar his daughter-in-law, Go to your father's house until Selah, my youngest son, is grown. But Judah did not want to give his youngest son to her, because 2 other men had already died when they married her. And so Tamar went and stayed in her father's house, and over the process of time Judah's wife died. And Judah, when he had finished mourning his wife, he went up to the sheep shearers in Timnath with his friend Hira the Adullamite. And Tamar found out that he was on travel, for it was told to her, Behold, your father-in-law has gone up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she changed out of her widow's clothing, and put on a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is on the way to Timnath, for she knew that Selah was grown now, and she was not given to him to be his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, because she covered her face like a harlot. And he went to her and said, Let me come in unto you, for he didn't recognize that was his daughter-in-law. She said, What will you give me for payment? And Judah said, I will give you a kid of the goats from my flock. And she said, What will you give me as a pledge until you send the goat? What pledge shall I give you? Give me your signet ring, your bracelets, and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave it to her, and he slept with her, and she became pregnant. She then left and went back home and put on her widow's garments. Then later Judah sent the kid of the goats from his flock through his friend Hira the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the harlot. But when his friend went there, he could not find her. Then he asked a man that it was in the area, saying, Where's the harlot that was sitting out in the open? And they said, There is no harlot in this place. He then returned to Judah and said, I can't find the harlot. Judah said, Let her keep it, so we be not ashamed. It came to pass after 3 months after that it was told to Judah that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, had played the harlot, and now she is pregnant. Bring her to me, and let her be burnt. When she was brought to him, she said to her father-in-law, saying, I am pregnant by the man whose these belong to. And she said, Discern, I pray thee, who does this signet, these bracelets, and this staff belong to? And Judah realized that they were his, and said, She has been more righteous than I, because I didn't give my son Selah to her. Isn't it interesting how it was okay for the men to sleep around, but the women had to be burnt? I'm just saying. He slept with her no more after that. When Tamar gave birth to Judah's child, there were twins in her womb. Like his father, twins run in the family. When the first child started to come out, he stuck his arm out, and the midwife took a thread and tied it around his hand, saying, This child came out first. Then he pulled back his hand, and his brother came out. And the midwife said, How have you come around your brother? So his name was called Pharez, which means burst forth. Then afterward his brother came out that had the red thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah, which means dawn. This is Genesis 38. Then Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's captain of the guards, brought Joseph from the Ishmaelites. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a blessed man. And while he was in the house of his master, Potiphar the Egyptian, his master noticed that the Lord was with Joseph, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. Joseph found grace in Potiphar's sight, and he personally served him. And Potiphar made him overseer over his entire house. And all that he had he put into Joseph's hands. And it came to pass from the time that he that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessings of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house, in the field. Joseph was a good-looking man, and it came to pass that Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph. She said, "Lie with me." But Joseph refused and said to her, "Behold, my master has placed all that he has in my hands. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but to you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day after day after day, that he stopped listening to her. One day, Joseph went into the house to take care of his master's business, and there he thought he was alone by himself. Then Potiphar's wife caught him by his clothing and said, "Lie with me." And he left his clothes in her hand and ran out of the house naked. So when she saw that he left without his clothes, that she yelled and screamed to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, "Potiphar brought in this Hebrew to us to mock us. He came in unto me and tried to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard me screaming, that he left his clothes and ran out naked." So she accused Joseph of rape. She then laid up his clothes by her until Potiphar came home. She then spoke to her husband, "The Hebrew servant which you brought in unto us came to me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his clothes with me and ran out." When Potiphar heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, then he became very angry with Joseph and put him into prison. Had it been anyone else, I believe they would have killed him. But because Potiphar knew God favored Joseph, he let him live. So Potiphar sent Joseph to prison because of his wife's lie. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the warden in the prison. So no matter where Joseph goes, he finds favor and he's blessed. We can even be blessed in the worst of situations. So the warden of the prison saw that everything became better after Joseph arrived. He then committed into Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, Joseph was in charge of them. So no matter where Joseph is, he is blessed. And this is Genesis 39. Then the butler of the Pharaoh of Egypt and his baker offended the Pharaoh, the great king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with them, so he put them in ward in the prison until he determined what he was going to do with them. Joseph was responsible for them. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. Then one day they dreamed a dream, both of them on the same night. Then Joseph came in to them in the morning, and he looked at them, and they looked very, very sad. So Joseph asked Pharaoh's officers, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpretation of it." Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dream, I pray thee." So not only is Joseph a good steward, good with money, skilled in agriculture, a man of good character, he dreams prophetic dreams, and also has the gift to interpret them. Joseph has it going on. The chief butler told him his dream to Joseph, and he said, "In my dream, behold, there was a vine before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and the branches budded, and the blossoms came forth, and the clusters on it brought forth ripe grapes, and Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes, and I pressed them in Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Joseph said to them, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up and restore you to your former position, and you shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand again, as you have done before as his butler. But remember me when it happens to you, and show me kindness, I pray thee, and make mention of me to the great Pharaoh so that I can get out of prison. For I was taken from my father's house, and I am innocent of the crime they accuse me of." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream, and behold, there were 3 white baskets on the top of my head. And in the top of the baskets were all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket on my head." Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 baskets are also 3 days. Within 3 days shall Pharaoh cut off your head, and shall hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat your flesh from off of you." And it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a great feast to all his servants, and he cut off the head of the chief baker. He then restored the chief butler to his position of his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted it. But the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot about him. And this is Genesis 40. Then 2 years passed, and Pharaoh dreamed a dream. He was standing by the river. There came up out of the river seven well-favored cattle that were fat and healthy, and they fed in a meadow. Then behold, there were 7 other cattle that came up after them out of the river, and they were sick-looking and very thin animals, and they stood by the other cattle on the brink of the river, and the sick-looking thin cattle ate up the 7 healthy-looking fat cattle. So Pharaoh woke up, and then Pharaoh fell back asleep again, and he dreamed the 2nd dream, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, blasted by the east wind, sprung up after them, and the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 full ears. Pharaoh then awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was very troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men, and Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one that could interpret it to the Pharaoh. Then the chief butler of Pharaoh said, "I do remember, my lord, when you put me in prison. Both me and the chief baker had a dream in the same night, and there was a young man, a Hebrew servant, and we told him our dream, and he interpreted it. Just as he said, you restored me to mine office, and the baker you hanged." So Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And they shaved him and changed his clothes, and he came in unto the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard that you understand the visions of the night." Joseph said, "It is not me, but God shall reveal, and shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "This is what I dreamed. In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 cattle, fat and full, well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And then 7 other cattle came up after them, poor and very sickly and lean, such as I have never seen in the land of Egypt. And the lean and the sick-looking cattle did eat up the first fat cattle, and when they had eaten them up, you couldn't not tell that they had eaten them, for they were still just as sickly looking and thin as in the beginning. So then I awoke, then I went back to sleep again, and I had another dream, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, full and good, and behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted by the east wind sprung up after them, and the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this to the magicians, but there was none that could interpret it to me." Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh is one and the same. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cattle are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. The true dreams are one and the same. The 7 thin and ill-looking cattle that came up out of the river are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears of corn blasted by the east wind are 7 years. Behold, there will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. There shall arise after them 7 years of famine. All the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, because of the famine shall consume all the land, and the plenty shall not be remembered in the land by reason of the great famine following it, for it shall be very grievous. That is why your dream came twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Joseph told Pharaoh, "You must choose a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt, and appoint officers over the land to take a portion of grain during those years of plenty, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep the food in the cities, that grain will sustain the peoples during the time of the famine." The thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this man, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Forasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is none so discreet and wise as you are. You shall be over my house. According to my word shall all my people be ruled. Only I will be greater than you." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck, and made him to ride in the second chariot that he had. And they cried before Joseph, "Bow the knee," and everyone bowed before him, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without you shall no man lift up his hand or foot in the land of Egypt." Pharaoh said, "Your name shall be called Zaphanaphaneah." And he gave him his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, for a wife. Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Then Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout all the land of Egypt. In the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth abundantly grain by the handfuls. He gathered up all the food for the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities around Egypt, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up the same way. Joseph set up storehouses in Egypt for the famine. The circular granaries were shaped like beehives, and were some 5 meters high and 2 to 3 meters in diameter. The grain was added through a door at the top by men standing on ladders. Then, as people came to buy grain, you could get it from a door stationed near the bottom of the complex. So the grain was deposited at the top by the Egyptians. Then when the people came to buy grain, it came out from an entryway set up at the bottom. The complex is called Saqqara, and it contained 11 massive pits. They could not be mistaken for tombs, for the tombs were underground and carefully sealed, while these were accessible from the surface, and they were extremely large. But most fascinating is that the fact that they all were connected by chutes from one pit to the other, where the grain is stored, and as one pit emptied out, it would fill into another pit. Let me just say, Joseph was a genius. And in modern times, when researchers visit the storage pit, there was still a little grain left in them. The passageway was a small door, so only a few people at a time could walk in. Once you walked in, you approached a man at the entrance at a small table. distribution on a massive scale. As the people arrived to get their grain, they lined up to enter the long corridor inside. They paid the one sitting at the table, and they proceeded through the corridor straight to the area of the grain bins. Once they descended a stairway next to the storage bins, they handed their sack to a worker who filled it with grain and returned it to them. Then they exited through a small door on the lower level, which led to the outside of the complex. Let me say it again, Joseph was a genius. The scriptures say Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he could not number it anymore, for there was so much of it. Then Joseph had 2 sons before the years of the famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare to him. Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, which means, for God has made me forget all my toil in my father's house. The name of his second son was called Ephraim, which mean God have caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that was in the land of Egypt ended. The 7 years of lack began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the lack was in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was hungry, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph." Now that's power, to go from a slave to the second most powerful man in all the world. Only God could have done such a thing. Pharaoh said about Joseph, "What he says to you, do it." So when men were starving, all the world went to Joseph. The famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians and to the other lands. And the famine was in the land of Egypt, and all the countries came to Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn. This is Genesis 41. Now when Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, "Why are you looking for answers among each other?" He said, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy grain for us, that we may live and not die." Joseph's 10 brothers then went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's little brother, Jacob did not let go to Egypt, just in case some trouble befell him. The sons of Israel came to buy corn among all the people looking for food in Egypt, for the famine was in all the lands of Canaan. Joseph's brothers came among all the people and bowed themselves down before him, and their faces were to the earth. But Joseph saw his brothers immediately among the many people, but he disguised himself so his brothers could not recognize him. And he spoke harshly to them. He said to them, "Where did you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan." Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed when he was a young boy. He said to them, "You are spies, here to see the land of Egypt." "No, my lord, but just to buy food is the reason why we are here. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." "No, but you are here to see the weakness of the land." "No, we are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father, and the other one is dead. The only way you can prove to me that you are not spies is to bring me your youngest brother here to me in Egypt. Send one of your brothers and let him go and get your other brother, and you shall be kept here in prison, that you may prove whether there is truth in what you are saying. The only way your words will be verified is if you bring your youngest brother to me, and you shall not be put to death." He then put them all together in the prison 3 days. Then they said one to another, "We are guilty concerning our brother Joseph, that we saw the anguish of his soul when he cried out to us, and we would not hear him. Therefore is this trouble come upon us." Reuben answered them, saying, "I told you not to hurt Joseph, but you would not listen to me. Therefore now his blood is on our hands." Joseph had his brothers brought from the dungeon to him again. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them by an interpreter. As his brothers were talking, he turned away from them and wept. He then fixed his face and turned back to them again, and talked with them, and took from them Simeon, and tied him before their eyes. Then Joseph commanded his servants to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them food for their journey. For he was letting them go back to their father, but Simeon his brother he kept there in prison. They filled their asses with corn, and they departed. As one of them opened their sack to give his animal food, he saw that there was money in his sack, that the money that they had paid the Egyptians with was back in his sack. He said to his brothers, "My money is here," and their heart skipped a beat, and they were afraid, very afraid, saying one to another, "What is this that God has done to us?" They came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan. They told him all that happened to them, saying, "We said to him, 'We are true men, we are not spies.' The governor said to us, 'I will know that you are true men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for the famine to your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. Then shall I know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men, and I will give your brother back to you. Then you will be able to conduct business in Egypt.' And then as we emptied our sacks, that behold, the money that we gave them for food was back in our sacks. When both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were extremely afraid. Jacob their father said to them, 'I have been through enough sorrow because of my children. Joseph is dead, and Simeon is in jail, and now you want me to give Benjamin to take down to Egypt? All these things are against me.' Reuben said, 'Kill my own 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. Trust me with Benjamin, and I will bring him to you again. My son shall not go down to Egypt, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If something happens to him on the way, then shall you bring my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave.'" And this is Genesis 42. It came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." Judah said to Jacob his father, "The governor said to us, 'You shall not see my face again except your younger brother be with you. We cannot go unless you send Benjamin.' Israel said, 'Why did you tell the man that you had another brother?' The man asked us straightly, Father, about our family. 'Is your father alive? Have you another brother?' And we told him according to his questions. How could we have known that he would say, 'Bring your brother down to Egypt'?" Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy with me, that we may live and not die, for we will definitely die if we don't go. I swear to you, Father, I will take care of Benjamin. And if I don't, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not delayed, we would have been back by now." Israel said to them, "If it must be, do this. Take the best of the fruits in the land in your vessels, and bring the governor a present, a little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds, and take double the money in your hand as before, and the money that was brought back again in your sacks. Carry it again in your hand. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise and go again to see the governor. May God Almighty give you mercy before the governor, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin." The brothers took the presents, and they took double the money in their hand. And Benjamin went with them, and they rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, "Bring these men to my home, prepare and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon." The servants did as Joseph commanded, and the man brought the brothers into Joseph's house. The brothers were very afraid then, because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, "Because of the money that we found in our sacks, this is the reason why he's brought us into the governor's house, so he can judge us and take us for slaves." And they came near to the servants of Joseph's house, and they spoke to the servant at the door of Joseph's house and said, "Sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food, And it came to pass, when we returned home, we saw that the money that we brought down was back in our sacks. We have brought it back, as well as money to buy more grain. We don't know who put our money back in our sacks." And the servant said, "Peace be to you. Fear not. Your God hath blessed you and put treasure in your sacks. I have your money." He brought Simeon out to them who had stayed in the prison until they returned. The servant brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet. And he gave their animals food. They prepared themselves to meet with Joseph at noon, for they were told that he would eat bread there. When Joseph came home, they brought him the presents their father gave them for the governor, and bowed themselves to him to the earth, just like it in Joseph's dream in the beginning. He asked them how they were doing, and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke of? Is he still alive?" They answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." They bowed down their heads and showed honor to Joseph. He lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, and said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke of to me?" Joseph said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph rushed away, for he became emotional by the presence of his younger brother, and looked for a place to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. He washed his face and went back out to his brothers, and was able to contain himself, and he sat and ate bread. The brothers sat down, and Joseph sat separate from them. For Egyptians do not eat with Hebrews, for it is an abomination to the Egyptians. They sat before him in the order of their birth, from the youngest to the eldest. The brothers marveled one to another that Joseph somehow knew the order of their birth. Joseph had their food brought to them, but Benjamin's food was 5 times as much as the other brothers, and they drank and were merry with Joseph. And this is Genesis 43. Joseph commanded the stewards of his house, saying, "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sacks, and put my cup in the sack of the youngest brother, with his money." The servant did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as it was morning, the men were sent away, they and their animals. And when they left the city only a little ways off, Joseph said to his steward, "Go, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you rewarded evil for good? Is not this the governor's cup? And why have you taken it? You have done evil in so doing.'" So the servant did as Joseph commanded him. The brothers said, "We have not stolen anything. Why is the governor saying this? God forbid that we should do this thing. Behold, the money which we brought to you is in our sacks again. We brought it again to you out of the land of Canaan. How then will we steal out of your governor's house silver or gold? The person's sack you find the governor's cup in, let him die, and we also will be the governor's slaves." Joseph's servants said, "Let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be our slave, and the others shall be blameless." They hurried and took down every man's sack to the ground, and opened every man's sack, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then the brothers tore their clothes, and they brought the brothers back into the city. Then Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, for he was there, and they fell before him on the ground. Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done?" Then Judah said, "What shall we say to my Lord? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has seen our sin. Behold, we are your servants." And Joseph said, "God forbid that I should do that. But the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, go home in peace to your father's house." Then Judah came near to Joseph's servant and said, "O my lord, let me be your servant, I pray thee, and let not your anger burn against my younger brother Benjamin, for you are even as Pharaoh. My father is old, and my younger brother is the son of his old age. He helps my father. My other brother Joseph, who is the second to the youngest, is dead. Benjamin is the only child left of their mother, whom my father dearly loved. You told us to bring our brother Benjamin here. We told you the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father, it would kill my father. We promised we would bring this young boy back to our father. My father said to us, you know that my wife gave birth to 2 sons, and Joseph is dead, surely torn in pieces. If you don't bring Benjamin back to me, surely it will kill me. How can we now go to our father and tell him these things? And this is Genesis 44. Then Joseph could not contain himself before all his brothers that stood by him. He began to cry. He told his servants of the house to leave. He alone stood among his brothers. Joseph then revealed who he was. He wept loudly. All the Egyptians of the house of Pharaoh heard him crying. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. His brothers were in shock. They could not utter a word. Joseph said to his brothers, come near me, I pray you. They came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that you sold me, for God sent me here to preserve your life. For these 2 years has the famine been in the land, and yet there is another 5 years remaining, in which there shall neither be any harvest of crops. God sent me before you that you might live. Go up to my father and say to him, Joseph is the governor of all Egypt. God has made him lord over the land. Come down to me and stay here, and you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and all of you as well, that I may take care of you during the famine. Joseph then embraced his younger brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck as well. He kissed all his brothers and wept upon them, and after that his brothers talked with him. The news was heard in the Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come, and they pleased Pharaoh as well, and his servants. Pharaoh agreed to let Joseph's family stay in Egypt. So the Pharaoh agreed with Joseph and commanded the brothers to bring their father and all that he had. I will give you a place to stay here in Egypt. You shall eat of the fat of the land. So Joseph's brothers went to get their father. Pharaoh gave the brothers clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. For his father were sent 10 asses with good things from Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father on his journey back to Egypt. So Joseph sent his brothers away, and they departed. When they came into the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is alive, and he is the governor of all Egypt. And Jacob's heart skipped a beat, for he didn't believe them. They told him everything Joseph said. Israel saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him. The spirit of Israel their father revived, and Israel said, It is true. Joseph my son is alive. I will go and see him before I die. This is Genesis 45. And Israel journeyed with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in the vision of the night, and said, Israel, and he said, Here I am, Lord. Do not fear to go to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation. I will go down with you into Egypt, and I also surely will bring you out again. So Israel went down into Egypt, and they took all that he had, and went down to Egypt. Now Israel sent Judah to Joseph to direct everyone into Goshen in Egypt. They came into the land of Goshen. Joseph then hurried in his chariot to meet his beloved father. Joseph then fell on his father's neck and wept for a very long time. And Israel said to Joseph, Now I can die in peace, since I have seen your face. This is Genesis 46. And then Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old are you? And Jacob said to the Pharaoh, The days of my years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few of my days have been evil since my youth. Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before him. When people began to run out of money to buy grain, then Joseph would make men pay for grain with their cattle. So throughout all that year, they would bring their cattle and they would get grain for their cattle. Then the next year, when they didn't have any cattle left, they would come to Joseph and say, We don't have any more cattle to buy bread. And Joseph would say, Then sell me your land, and I will give you grain for the land. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for the Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's, only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests received a portion assigned to them by Pharaoh. Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Joseph was told, Behold, your father is sick. And he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Jacob's servant told Jacob and said, Behold, your son Joseph is coming. And Israel straightened up himself and sat up in his bed. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me in Bethel in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, and I will make thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to you and to your seed after you for an everlasting possession. When I came from Padanaram, your mother Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan on the way when we were almost to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath. The same is now called Bethlehem. Israel looked at Joseph's sons and said, Whose children are these? Joseph said to his father, They are my sons, whom God has blessed me with in this place. Israel said, Bring them, I pray thee, to me, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim from old age, so that he could not see like his father Isaac before him. Joseph brought them near to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. I had not thought to see your face ever again, and God has shown me also your sons. Joseph brought his sons out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. Joseph took Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near to him. Now Israel switched hands, and put his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Manasseh, who is the oldest. He blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long until this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless your sons, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my father Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the earth. When Joseph saw that his father had switched hands, it displeased Joseph, and he held up his father's hands to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall be a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, And he said, God made you as Ephraim in your time to be as Manasseh, meaning God has chose the younger instead of the older son. Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again to the land of your fathers. Before his death he had Joseph put his hand under his thigh and swear an oath, Bury me not, I pray thee, in the land of Egypt, but bury me with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as you have said. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. Then the great man of God, Israel, gave up the ghost and died. This is Genesis 47 and 48. Israel said before his death, and called to all his sons, and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall come to pass in the last days. He said to Reuben, his eldest son, You are my firstborn, and my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as waters, you will not excel, because you went into your father's bed, and you slept with Bilhah, my concubine. To Simeon and Levi, you brothers were instruments of cruelty, for in your anger you slew a man, and in your self-will you digged down a wall. Cursed be your anger, for it was fierce, and your wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and I will scatter them in Israel. To Judah, you are he whom your brothers should praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a baby lion. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh, the peaceful one, comes, meaning Jesus. So Jacob went down the line and blessed all his sons. To Joseph he said, Is a fruitful branch, even a fruitful branch by a well, whose branches reach over the well. The archers did sorely grieve him, and shoot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the Almighty God, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Mighty One, who shall bless thee with the blessings from heaven above, and the blessings from the deep underneath. To Benjamin, you shall be like a raven wool. In the morning you shall devour your prey, and at night you shall divide the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave which is in the field of Ephron, in the cave in that field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. They buried Isaac and Rebekah my mother, and they buried my wife Leah. Interestingly enough, Leah was buried with Jacob, but Rachel was not. Leah was the one least loved by Jacob, but she was buried with her forefathers. God always remembers the rejected. And when Israel had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet in the bed, and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. This is Genesis 49. After Jacob's death, Joseph fell upon his father's face, and wept upon him, and kissed him. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those that are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in thy sight, allow me now to leave, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come back again. So Pharaoh agreed to let Joseph leave to bury his father. Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all his servants, all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, all the elders of the land of Egypt, all the house of Joseph, and his brothers, and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. Jacob's sons carried him into the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of Machpelah. Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his family. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said that Joseph will perhaps hate us, and will certainly repay us for all the evil that we did to him. So Joseph's brothers go to Joseph and said, Forgive us, I pray thee now, the sin of your brothers, for we did evil to you. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also wept. His brothers also went and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we be your servants. And Joseph said to them, Fear not, my brothers, for I am not in the place of God. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass that it is this day to save a multitude of people alive. Now therefore fear not, I will nourish you and your little ones. Be comforted. He comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. So Joseph died, being 110 years, and they embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. This is Genesis 50. Joseph was a type of Jesus. What do I mean? Well, Joseph was a savior for his people, and Joseph's life had to be afflicted. He had to stand, and his life had to be afflicted so that his people might be saved. Because if Joseph had not been afflicted, if he had not been cast into prison, if he had not been sold into Egypt, the Israelite people would have died off. So even in Joseph's time, God is revealing the need for a Savior. There will always be those that will betray and test people in order for them to deliver others. Sometimes we don't always go through things for ourselves, but we go through things to deliver others. God did it in Joseph's time, He did it in Moses' time, and He did it with Jesus. Trials birth us into our destiny. Thank you for taking this walk with me through the scriptures. I pray it has been a benefit to you and inspires you to read the Word of God for yourself if you're not engaged already. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. This is the word of the day. Please like and share, and by all means subscribe to this channel. Blessings and shalom. Until next time.